All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight at this virtual public meeting. My name is Sandy Shackelford. I am the Director of Planning and Transportation for the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. And this is the organization that also administers the Charlottesville-Albemarle MPO, or CAMPO for short. MPO stands for Metropolitan Planning Organization. I am joined tonight by my colleagues, Lucinda Shannon, who will be assisting with the meeting facilitation, and Ryan Mickles, who is working with me on the development of the Moving Toward 2050 Long-Range Transportation Plan. Hopefully you are all aware that our meeting tonight is focused on the Long-Range Transportation Plan for the Charlottesville-Albemarle MPO, which we have named Moving Toward 2050. Tonight, I'll provide some background on what the plan is, why it's important, and the process we are going through to develop it. I'll talk about the goals and objectives we have identified related to the plan, and then I'll wrap up by letting you know how you can get involved and engage in the plan development. Our goals for the current phase of the plan development are to first inform the community about the plan and create broad community awareness that this process is underway. So that's part of why we are holding this webinar tonight. Second, we will start collecting feedback on the community's transportation priorities. And third, we want to hear from the public on specific transportation challenges and improvements that they identify as they move throughout our region. Before we get started, there are just a few housekeeping notes that I want to go over. First, this is an informational webinar, so there are no opportunities to speak this evening. However, if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A option located at the bottom of your screen. Lucinda and Ryan will be monitoring those, and we'll have an opportunity to address questions at the end. If you'd like to make a comment, you can use the chat function also located at the bottom of your screen. This meeting is being recorded. Retained records will include any written questions, responses, and comments. We will also be translating these slides into Spanish, and those slides will be placed on our website. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. So before we jump into the content of the presentation, I just wanted to take a minute to hear a little bit more from you all. So Lucinda is going to launch a poll that asks you first what your current primary mode of transportation is, and then second, your geographic connection to the MPO area.
So the poll questions are, what is your primary mode of transportation? And you can select any of the following: drive alone, carpool, bike, walk and or use a mobility device, scooter, or transit, the bus, or a taxi ride hailing service, Uber or Lyft.
No, Lucinda, I believe if you scroll down, there's a second question.
Oh, sorry. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, other and prefer not to answer. And then the second question, if you scroll down in your poll, is how are you connected to the MPO area? And this also is a single choice. You can choose from I live and work within the MPO area, and you can see the blue on the slide, the map. The blue area is the MPO area. I travel into the MPO area to work but live outside the area. I live within the MPO area but work outside the area. I neither work nor live within the MPO area but travel to the area. Other and prefer not to answer.
Just take a second to wrap up your responses.
It looks like everybody's voted.
Okay.
So I'll end the poll and share the results.
Yeah.
And for the first question, what is your primary mode of transportation? It looks like 50% drive alone, 25% bike, and 25% walk and or use mobility devices. And for the how you're connected to the MPO area question, 100% of them live and work within the MPO area.
Well, thank you all for sharing a little bit about who we're talking to tonight. And I know it's a small group, but I like seeing that there's a pretty good mix of how people are getting around, and that this is a project that obviously is important to you all that live and work within the region that we're discussing. All right. So I'm going to start the presentation by talking a little bit about why the Moving Toward 2050 plan is important and why we go through the process of developing the plan. So the short answer to the question of why we developed the plan is because we are federally required to. Based on those federal regulations, all areas that meet this eligibility criteria must use a planning horizon year of at least 20 years, and the plan must be updated every 5 years. As a region, we have chosen to use a planning horizon of 25 years when considering future roadway operations and conditions. So we're really looking out to the year 2050 when evaluating existing and future conditions of the system for the purposes of developing the plan. That's why we call the plan moving toward 2050, because we are planning for the year 2050. The Charlottesville-Albemarle Metropolitan Planning Organization is the body that is charged with developing and implementing the plan for our region. MPOs are federally established organizations that are responsible for carrying out what is known as a C3 agreement, or continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive transportation planning and programming processes. The MPO boundaries that are shown in blue on this map are based on existing urbanized areas that are defined by the census and include additional areas that are likely to develop. The MPO for our region includes the city of Charlottesville, which is shown in the center of the map, as well as the urbanized portions of Albemarle County. It's important to emphasize that while transportation is a regional consideration, the long-range transportation plan will only address specific transportation improvements that are needed within the MPO area shown in blue. So what does the plan do? The purpose of the plan is to consider the system-wide needs for improvement across all modes of the service transportation system. These include bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements, transit improvements, and roadways. This plan is used to establish regional priorities for financial investments into our regional transportation system, allowing us to evaluate which projects will help us best meet our regionally identified transportation goals. There are a lot of different factors we can use to determine which transportation improvements will benefit our region the most. And as part of identifying our regional priority projects, we'll use the plan to answer questions about how we can improve general access to community destinations and jobs, how to improve safety for users of all travel modes, and how to better connect our bicycle and pedestrian networks. There are a few reasons that this plan is important. The required outcome of the long-range transportation plan, based on the existing regulations, is a prioritized list of transportation improvement projects. The prioritization is based both on the ability of the identified transportation project to help meet the community meet its established needs, as well as the financial resources that are likely to be available to implement the projects. Identifying high priority projects in the long-range plan is important for several reasons. First, being identified in the long-range transportation plan is a requirement for projects to be eligible to receive federal funding through the most used funding programs such as SmartScale. Second, it helps the region think strategically about which projects are most critical given the limited funding available for project implementation. There are a lot of valuable improvements we could be making, but this process gives us the opportunity to have a regional discussion about what types of projects would have the most benefit. Third, funding that is available to implement projects is competitive, meaning we have to prepare and submit applications for funding that are evaluated based on the project's merits compared to their costs. Going through this process helps us determine which projects are best suited for the different types of funding programs available. And finally, the plan allows us to identify high priority system needs where there is not currently a project that is identified to meet that need. This allows us to develop a planning pipeline to continually identify and prepare funding applications for projects that are critical to our regional transportation system. To give you some context, this slide shows a list of projects that were identified in the previous long-range transportation plan that have been funded since that plan was approved in 2019. This list includes a variety of project types, roadway projects that factor in pedestrian activity and transit access, park and ride lots, and shared use paths. These projects are not yet under construction, but have either been selected for funding or recommended for funding through the state's 6-year improvement program. And this slide shows a map of the project locations. This map only shows projects that have been approved or recommended for funding that were applied for by the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission or the Charlottesville-Albemarle MPO. Albemarle County and the City of Charlottesville also pursue projects that are identified in the long-range plan, but those are not shown on this map. So we've reviewed the reason that MPOs developed the plan, what the plan does, and why it's important. And now I'm going to talk about the process of identifying the priority system needs and priority projects. This is the heart of the planning effort that we're going through. The first thing we do is define what our goals and objectives are for our transportation system. This is essential because it sets the framework for how we will determine which system improvements are most critical compared to all the good projects that our region could be pursuing. We will use those goals and objectives to evaluate the existing system the way the existing system is performing using data. For example, we'll pull data to see where there are areas with high crash frequencies, consistent congestion issues, or gaps in the network that limit access to good services and jobs. We're also asking the public to provide us with information on where they see issues or needs for improvements in the transportation system. Using both the data and the public feedback will allow us to identify the areas where there is a high need indicated compared to all the system deficiencies that have been identified. The next step is to look through all of the projects that have been developed through previous planning efforts that have not yet been implemented and determine where projects have already been developed that can meet our highest priority needs. We will go through a process of prioritizing these projects based on their ability to resolve the system needs and then also based on the total cost of the project. The reason we use a project cost is because we have to acknowledge the funding constraints when we make decisions about the projects to pursue. The final step is to call out locations where there are high priority needs or where there is no suitable project that has yet been identified to meet those needs. These will be identified in the plan as high priority studies, and as resources are made available, we will work as a region to develop solutions to address those needs for consideration in future long-range plans, creating an ongoing project pipeline to have projects ready and lined up for implementation. The reason you are all here tonight is because an important aspect of developing this plan is hearing what is important from the public. As part of this process, the Charlottesville-Albemarle MPO is committed to providing meaningful opportunities for public feedback to inform the identification of our transportation system priorities. We began public engagement in February by meeting with several stakeholder groups that represented different segments of our community to discuss the draft goals and objectives language that was initially developed. We are currently entering into a broad public engagement phase where we are collecting information from the general public that will be used to help us determine how much weight to give to each of the goals and objectives as we evaluate the system performance, and are also collecting information from the public on specific needs or improvements that they identify throughout the region. Public feedback on the relative importance of the different goals and objectives in comparison to each other will be used to evaluate the system performance based on the data that is collected. We will also pull the location-specific information from the mapping exercises that are being conducted to determine where the public has identified locations that need improvement. The combination of evaluating the system using data and looking at locations where the public has identified a need for improvements will help us create a full picture of the current operations of our transportation system and where there are identified needs. In order to better understand how the input from the public engagement will inform the analysis of the data, it will be helpful to understand how the information we are collecting through our public engagement efforts will translate into the data analysis or the numbers. The framework we've used to structure this process relies on starting with a broad set of lenses that are intended to inform the rest of the evaluation. These lenses are broad community values that have been interwoven into the evaluation process. Goals and objectives will inform how the needs and projects are prioritized. Goals are general value statements that are specific to the transportation system, and then the objectives are more specific, measurable statements that support the achievement of the goal. For example, improving safety is a goal, but we know we are improving safety based on reducing the number or rate of fatal and serious injury crashes, or by improving the comfort and safety of the system for multimodal infrastructure. So those are the objectives that help us know when we are meeting the goal of improving safety. Metrics are the actual data that is collected and used to evaluate the system needs and projects. To develop the goals and objectives that will be used for this plan, we started by reviewing the goals and objectives from our previous plan that was adopted in 2019. We also reviewed related plans that were developed both by our regional bodies as well plans that were undertaken by Charlottesville and Albemarle to identify emerging priorities that have surfaced since the previous plan was adopted in 2019. We then conducted a benchmarking exercise where we reviewed goals and objectives that were developed in other regions' plans. Through these efforts, we were able to develop initial goals and objectives that had general support from the MPO committee. We wanted to further vet the draft goals and objectives language through a public process in order to determine where we may have missed important considerations and to determine whether the language would be clearly understood by the public. So we coordinated some stakeholder discussion group meetings to provide some public feedback into the draft language. We met with 3 different stakeholder groups made up of business community representatives, public safety personnel, and community partner organizations. 25 individuals participated in these discussions to provide general feedback on our goals and objectives. Based on their feedback, we made adjustment to the language, and it was actually after these discussions that we went back and added the lens framework. The final format for our evaluation framework looked something like this. The 3 lenses we identified are based on emerging priorities that have been identified at local, state, and federal levels, which have all consistently identified the importance of remembering that people are at the center of this discussion, the quality of life lens, that equity has to be built into the process for it to meaningfully inform the outcomes, and that for us to meet our local and regional carbon reduction goals, we need to be considering the climate impacts of our transportation system comprehensively. The relationship between the goals and the objectives is also complex. The goals we identified include improving safety, improving multimodal accessibility, improving connections among community destinations in ways that support locally identified growth management priorities, improving system efficiency and reliability, and reducing the environmental impacts of the transportation system. Developing the initial list of objectives related to the goals was fairly straightforward. However, we ended up seeing a lot of overlap where one objective seemed to support multiple goals. Instead of grouping specific objectives under individual goal statements, we rethought the structure and developed this diagram to show the relationship between the objectives and the goals. While you don't see the words equity and climate action used throughout the goals and objectives language, I want to assure you that the lens framework is still at play. The climate action lens is really demonstrated by the number of arrows that are pointing to the environmental goal. We don't have a good way to capture specific metrics around carbon reduction, but anything we do to improve active and public transportation options, better integrate transportation and land use planning considerations, and improve system efficiency will reduce emissions and support the decarbonization goals. The considerations for equity impacts will be captured through the use of the metrics when we start evaluating the system performance. To the extent possible, we also included metrics related to equity to understand impacts on both the general population as well as historically marginalized populations, which will be part of the data evaluation once we get to that part of the planning process. So I know that was a lot of information to go through, and we'll start working through any questions you all have in just a minute. But the part I'm really excited about is hearing from you all as part of this planning effort. We have a couple of ways for you to provide feedback that will be used to inform the planning priorities. The first and maybe the easiest opportunity is for you to take the MetroQuest survey. The survey will be open for the next several weeks. It should take just a couple minutes to fill out, and we would especially appreciate you dropping any comments into the map that is included as part of the survey. I think Lucinda is going to drop the link to the survey in the chat, and we'd also love for you to share that link among your networks if you know others that have opinions about the transportation system that would like to provide them through the survey tool. If you take the survey and realize later that you have another thought, please feel free to drop us a comment in the online comment box on our website. That will be open for the duration of the project. We will also be hosting an open house at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission's Water Street Center tomorrow evening between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. This is a drop-in event, and we will have more information about the existing transportation system available for review at the open house. And there will be opportunities for you to ask our staff questions and share your thoughts at this meeting. That event information is also available at the top of our webpage, and I believe Lucinda is going to drop the link to that webpage in the chat as well. We're also working to get out into the community this summer, so if you have a group that would be interested in talking to us about transportation planning in the region, we'd love to coordinate an opportunity with you to present this information and hear from your group. As we work through collecting public feedback, we're also going to be working to develop a comprehensive list of previously identified projects that will be used to match against high priority system needs. These will come from a variety of sources, including locality developed plans, State Department of Transportation studies, transit development plans, as well as other regional studies that have been completed. Once we complete our public engagement for this phase, we'll be using that information to identify priority needs, start identifying appropriate projects, and begin developing project priorities. And then we will come back to the community to get more public feedback. We'll also identify our gap needs, where we will prioritize additional planning studies to continue developing our project pipeline. Once we've worked through the development of the project priorities, we will complete the draft plan and move towards our final public meetings and public hearings for plan adoption. So that includes my prepared discussion for tonight, so we can work through any questions you all may have at this time. Just a reminder that if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, you'll need to type those out using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen or the chat function. Lucinda, are there any questions or comments at this time?
Yeah, hold on, I'm posting the address of the tomorrow's event. So
thank you.
there is one comment. So Mr. Krebs commented that vehicle miles traveled per capita would be one carbon related measure. And Mr. Krebs commented that these issues will be available for eval at the open house. Yes, they will.
Wait. I'm sorry, can you clarify? I'm sorry, I thought that was a comment. Which issues?
I'm not sure which issues.
Okay. All the information that's presented here tonight will be available at the open house for review. And then the goals and objectives will also be available for review and comment. And then we will also have some of the data on maps that's available for review and comment. And we'll be collecting public feedback at the open house.
So Mr. Krebs commented on how sharp Mr. Michaels looks tonight, and I agree with that. Nobody told me we were dressing up. And that the diagram, he's asking if the diagram with the arrows could new arrows be suggested at the open house tomorrow night?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
That is all we have so far.
Okay, I'll give it just another minute if you all think of anything else. But in the meantime, if you have any comments or if you think of anything, definitely feel free. My email address is up on the slide. You can feel free to send me an email or drop a comment in the comment box on the website. There are no other comments. I just want to thank you all for coming tonight, for spending your evening with us. Again, we hope to see some of you tomorrow at our open house between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. I think comments on anything are on the table right now at this point. We're still at a very early phase of collecting information. I just want to let you know that at the end of this webinar, you will be prompted to take a survey. This survey is optional and it will be used to help us determine if the feedback we are receiving is representative of the community. And it can also be used by us to help us meet our federal reporting requirements. So please consider taking that survey if you're willing to. Otherwise, thank you again for joining us this evening. I hope you all have a good evening, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you as we think about what it looks like to move in the year 2050. Thanks, everyone.